Welcome back to Agile Project Management 101, Running Meetings for a Scrum Sprint. In this section, we're going to be talking about daily stand-ups. Now, daily stand-ups are very simple, straightforward meetings that should take no longer than 15 minutes or so to complete. The name of stand-up meeting comes from the idea that each individual will stand up and say 3 things and sit back down. Now, you don't actually have to stand up during these meetings. Oftentimes, these meetings can be completed via web conferencing, and even if they are in person, you don't actually have to stand up to really utilize this practice. The main piece of this is that each person goes around and says the 3 components that they should be including in a stand-up, and these are very important pieces here. And those 3 components are 1, what did you do yesterday? 2, what are you working on today? And 3, do you have any blockers for working on those items? So let's break this down a little bit more. First, what did you do yesterday? Now, this is often cited as what did you do yesterday to further the sprint goal? But really, this is looking for what work has been completed or is in progress for the sprint based on those stories that are assigned to the individual. Or maybe the individual is part of a team working on a story. This keeps the group at large on the same page and can track the progress of those items. We'll talk about progress a little bit more in just a second. 2, the second item is what are you working on today? And again, this really helps with managing the sprint. Again, these are daily items, so it really should be focused and granular here. 3, do you have any blockers? Is there a problem that you're stuck on with creating something? Are there dependencies to your work? And again, this is tracking the progress. And one of the reasons why this is the biggest piece of the daily stand-up is as a Scrum Master or Project Manager, one of your main goals is to help remove blockers. And so in this instance, maybe a developer is working on a story and they are stuck on how to architect the code to be able to actually have it function properly and keep running into errors. And so this would be considered a blocker. And what would happen is they would say, yesterday I worked on this, but I had a blocker and I was unable to complete the story yesterday. Maybe the story was estimated at 4 hours and they spent 8. And this allows you to do 2 things. 1, remove the blocker for the individual by either assigning resources, maybe adding more hours to the time estimate for the story, or just whatever is needed to help remove that blocker. And 2, it allows you to adjust the sprint capacity on the fly, or rather adjust the sprint within regards to the capacity. So in this instance, maybe the capacity was set to exactly 40 with a 40-hour work week without a buffer. In that instance, we would want to move a story to the backlog or assign further resources that had a little bit of buffer to help this individual or take on that story. Because again, you have that capacity of 40 hours and are not really able to go over that. Another additional item that we want to talk about when removing blockers is something called the parking lot. Oftentimes when blockers are discussed, the details can start to be brought out, and maybe not even just with blockers, but if you are discussing what is worked on yesterday or today, details are brought up by individuals and discussions like prioritization, functionality, design, user interaction, user experience can come up just from these discussions naturally. While some discussion is very normal and natural and okay, a lengthy discussion can make this 15-minute quick meeting to get everyone on the same page 3 hours long if it goes too far. The parking lot is a tool to use in any meeting, but especially in daily stand-ups. And the parking lot is essentially saying, this is a great conversation, this is a great topic to continue, but this meeting is for a specific task. So the idea of a parking lot is, let's say there is a blocker and the developer starts discussing the details of it. You can say, let's move that to the parking lot. and assign a resource, maybe another developer, a senior developer, to help with that. And those two individuals after the meeting can address that and handle it there. So essentially, it's a way to move on from a topic while saying you will address it later. Now, speaking of addressing items later and adjusting and kind of moving things within a sprint, when should you adjust a sprint? We previously talked about capacity concerns. Again, we were using an instance where a developer had 40 hours capacity and was maxed out based on the number of stories assigned in the sprint. That is absolutely when you should adjust the stories that are in a given sprint for that individual. Whether it's moving the stories to a different person who has more room in their capacity or moving items to the backlog. Additionally, an instance where you would want to move stories around in a sprint is when the stakeholders give feedback mid-sprint on a different priority. Now, this is generally frowned upon. The reason why sprints are short iterative cycles is because it can allow for development to complete tasks in a short amount of time and then give feedback and continue that loop. But in the real world, it happens. Stakeholders, even the next day, may change their mind, and in which case, reprioritizing and moving items out of the sprint and into the backlog, or vice versa even, are appropriate. Again, the two instances when to adjust the sprint would be if you have capacity concerns or if stakeholders are reprioritizing. Now, after you've gone through each individual and potentially talked about what the individual did yesterday, what they're working on today, and then defined the way to remove the blocker, don't forget to wrap up the meeting. Meetings can linger, and so it's great to have a definitive sentence, thank everyone, and wrap up the meeting. And with that, we're going to wrap up this audio.